Greetings and welcome to Eye Care Leadership Live. This is the podcast for eye care leaders who want to level up their leadership, create better cultures, and improve the financial results of their clinics. Now, let's join the show. Well, welcome to Eye Care Leadership Live. Today, my guest here is Kade Wilcox, and Kade is the founder of Convert Health. He's an ophthalmology guy. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but he's super well connected in the world. He's an expert on lead gen, lead conversion, and ophthalmology. And we're going to be talking about that today. So, Kade, thanks for joining me.
I appreciate you having me, Mike. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, well, I've followed you for a while on LinkedIn. We've been connected. You interviewed me in the past. We've gotten to know each other. I've seen you at the conferences and stuff. And you've just been that guy that's present, helpful, sharing your knowledge. And I thought, what better person to have talk about this topic?
Yeah.
So I guess I always like to understand people's backgrounds and how they got into this. And you're such an expert on this topic. How did you get into ophthalmology? You're helping practices with generating leads, converting leads, which is obviously so important. What brought you here?
Yeah, good question. So I've been an entrepreneur now for 15 years. My wife and I started our first company October 1st, 2011. I remember sending the invoice via FreshBooks, and it was for $500. It felt like we were rich, and so that was great. But I'm an entrepreneur. I love starting new businesses and being helpful and bringing value wherever I can. And I would say most of my last 15 years have really been building marketing agencies, actually. Okay. And so have owned a couple of different marketing agencies and I've really enjoyed that whole journey of learning how to help small businesses and companies generate, new clients and customers and grow revenue. And that's really translated into just, trying to help elective healthcare practices. And then I really got obsessed with ophthalmology a couple of years ago. I had the opportunity to kind of take over a company that was plateauing and struggling and needed to pivot and change and evolve and grow. And so I was able to lead that company for a couple of years. But the most fortunate thing that happened to me through that was I was able to kind of learn about ophthalmology. And the company had one ophthalmology client kind of doing a little bit of stuff for a practice in Idaho. But it was really my second client that I sold, which was Slade and Baker in Houston. Of course, that's Dr. Stephen Slade, who's one of the most well-known ophthalmologists in the country. And of course, I didn't know that. And so the fortunate part about that is he and I hit it off really well. So did his practice leader, Delphina, and I. And then he also worked with Michael Dubkowski at Glacial. And so here are two people who have been in ophthalmology for a very long time. Dr. Slade being one of the more well-known, renowned ophthalmologists. And then, Michael having been in ophthalmology marketing for 25 years. And so that kind of just snowballed my opportunities to meet people and get connected to other practices. And by the time I left that company, we were serving over 45 ophthalmology practices. I was very fortunate to, learn some of the best of the best, Dr. Vance Thompson, Dr. Dell, Dr. Doan, Dr. Allison Early, and then met all the industry partners like Troy Cole and Michael King and Michael Dubkowski and others. And so honestly, I fell in love with ophthalmology, but I have to say, I just feel very fortunate and lucky to have been introduced to the industry. And I still have a lot to learn and learning a lot, but man, I have fallen in love and I'm kind of going to just focus the next decade of my entrepreneurial journey in ophthalmology.
Yeah. Well, you're pretty humble there. You said you have a lot to learn. I think ophthalmology practices have a lot to learn from you. You've built marketing agencies. And I think when I think about healthcare in general and ophthalmology, I think marketing is probably the thing that they know the least, right? Maybe close second is HR. But what is it that they don't understand about a marketing? What do they do wrong when it comes to marketing their clinics?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I actually think definitely there are some practices that have marketing problems, whether it's their brand or whether it's messaging and understanding what resonates and connects with the patient, or where they should spend their ad dollars. So certainly there are practices that struggle with marketing. My biggest observation over the last, a little over 2 years is that most practices actually don't have marketing problems. They have a follow-up problem. And so the vast majority of practices that I've engaged with and I've worked with, they're actually really good at their marketing, or they are working with an agency who's very effective at generating new patient leads. I think where the breakdown actually happens is when marketing hands a new patient lead off to the practice. That's where things kind of start to go south. And so that's actually my biggest observation about practice marketing is it's actually not a marketing problem in most cases. It's a follow-up and a patient engagement problem.
Mm. And so what do you think that what is the core issue there with, is it that they don't know what to do, they don't have good systems, all the above?
Yeah. It's actually not that they don't know what to do. I think most people understand, just intuitively that the patient experience doesn't start when they walk into the practice. It actually starts when they initially start connecting with your brand and how your team is following up. And so I don't think it's ignorance, honestly, that creates this as a problem for most
Mm.
practices. I think it's that they are, just overwhelmed with all the moving parts going on in a practice. When you think of the teams of people who are typically responsible for following up with new patient leads that marketing is generating, it's usually folks who are already wearing five hats. They're answering phone calls from
Mm.
existing patients, which most practices I've engaged have an outrageously high call volume. So those people are answering phone calls. In a lot of the smaller practices, the 1 to 2 provider, single location, they're also checking patients in at the front desk. So they're taking patient calls, they're checking people in, they're covering for someone who's out that day sick or on vacation or whatever. And so the problem is typically the folks responsible for following up with new patient leads, nurturing them, and booking them for consults are wearing five hats. I
Mm.
think the second biggest challenge I've seen is they just lack the kind of technology and workflow to adequately follow up, nurture, and book patients for consults in a way that modern patients expect. So I literally had experience with my own dentist this morning. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I really tried finding a way to book online so I could compare my doctor's schedule to my own schedule and just easily find something, which is very difficult. My schedule is just as full as his. And of course, I couldn't do that. So I did the next best thing and I requested an appointment via the website. And I was very specific on the days and the time ranges that I was looking for. And no one responded to that. Instead, I got a phone call. And of course, I get a phone call, while I'm on a Zoom call. So I miss it and I have to call back and then I'm on hold. And then I get a lady and she asks me for my name, my birthday, and all this stuff. She looks it up and she goes, "Oh, can you hold 1 second?" So I go to hold 1 second. I wait for about a minute, minute and a half. Another lady picks up the phone and I have to repeat myself. What's my name? What's my birthday? What am I looking for? So I looked at my phone when I was done with the call and I was on the phone for about 11 minutes.
Mm.
So this is the challenge that practices have across the board, whether it's a dentist or an orthodontist or a plastic surgery group or an ophthalmologist. It's that patients like me expect to experience their practice like I do Amazon and Uber and DoorDash and my Marriott app. And instead, I'm engaging a team who's wearing five different hats. They do not have the time to create the experience that I expect, and they do not have the technology that supports me being able to kind of go through the patient journey, in a way that I expect. So these really are the problems that all ophthalmology practices are trying to tackle, regardless if you're a 1 to 2 provider practice or, you're the biggest and the best.
It's so true. The We are all so busy now. Everyone here in the world, we've got so many things on our plates. People working side hustles, having to be their own travel agent. This is not the 80s. More things have been pushed on us as consumers. And so when you go to make a purchase, and you talked about Amazon, you expect to have a seamless experience. And that was a wonderful example right there of just how unseamless it is. And we were talking before we even got on the call about how busy we are, how busy lives are. So, if there was one thing, if there was one thing that a clinic could do, is it upgrade their technology? Is it hire a dedicated conversion salesperson? What do you think it is?
That's a good question. I don't think it's just one thing, unfortunately. I think that makes it rather difficult.
Mm,
But if I were to say just one thing, I think having someone who's dedicated to new patients would be a good start.
mhm,
I still think it's a bit incomplete. I think there's more you can do to create a better experience and, really capitalize on every new patient lead you're getting.
yeah.
But if you were only going to do one thing, you weren't going to change anything else but one thing.
Mm,
I do think having someone whose only role and responsibility is to engage and follow up with new patient leads would get you, 80% there, compared to how most practices are currently doing it. Mainly just because it that focus of time and effort and energy would go into that new patient and not being distracted and pulled across,
mm.
multiple, parts of the practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm working with a client right now that is in the midst of trying to fill a role just like that. And it's
Mm.
interesting because even that role is wearing a couple hats because it's sort of a kind of a technician hat for these new incoming conversions, and it also has sort of a sales and marketing kind of a hat. And maybe that's just you can't separate those two things,
Well,
but
it's a bummer. I don't know why practices won't. I mean, I have my suspicions, and I could be wrong. I would love to hear from others, and maybe you have an opinion on this too. But I think it's just this idea that we've convinced ourselves everyone should be able to wear multiple hats and do each of those things really, really well.
mm,
And I get the urge to do that, to maximize the investment, to fill the time, to make sure you're getting the most out of that person. But when you think about the value there is, particularly in a new surgical patient, right?
mm,
Like what if this is a premium cataract, lead? What if this is an RLE lead? Like you're looking at something that's, quite significant in terms of value to the practice. And if you're giving them your leftovers, if the first experience that this patient that wants to spend $10,000, $15,000 with your practice, if their first experience is frustration, like
mm.
mine was with my dentist, is that not worth investing in someone both from their focus and their time and capacity, as well as supporting them with the right technology? Would it not be worth, creating a premium patient experience in the sales process? Another thing I see all the time, I'm so fortunate to get to visit and travel and see a lot of these practices. And it really is remarkable what these practices are creating in terms of the patient experience when you walk through the door.
Mm.
I've been to Juliet Eye in Albuquerque. I mean, one of the best practices I've ever been to. Vance Thompson's practice in South Dakota. I think it's almost like a one-of-one experience, right? So these practices are doing an incredible job of the patient experience when the patient walks through the door, but I find that they tend to not think about the patient experience until then. And so if you take the patient experience phase one, when they become a patient from your brand and your marketing, and then the patient experience phase two, as you follow up, nurture, and book them for the consult, and you take it serious once they actually show up, you really are, what I would call a premium practice. But you got to take all those things serious. And I think it's the practices that do take that serious that are the ones that really do differentiate themselves from their competitor, create a remarkable experience, for the patient, which then snowballs, and helps you build your practice and get more referrals. And you know how it goes.
Yeah. What do you think is how critical is the physician's role in these elective procedures in making a conversion? Is it kind of just, hey, I'm just the medical expert and someone else is going to kind of massage and explain and get you excited, or is the physician really critical there?
Yeah, really good question. I think they can be, but not necessarily required. I mean, I think there's a lot of things a practice can do from the moment someone becomes a new patient lead, following up with them, nurturing them, getting booked for the consult. Then I think there's a lot of things that practice can do with workflows and automation and technology in your internal team to, nurture and educate that patient from consult to actually showing up to the consult.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot of things that can be done by the team and supporting, apparatus to that. I think where the physician has a real unique opportunity to shine is obviously, once they're sitting across from the patient.
Mm.
And I actually think it's pretty cool that a practice, when they do this right, there is a lot they get to do to establish the patient relationship, establish the credibility and the kind of feeling that the patient has about the practice even before they get to the physician.
Mm.
So they come into the consult or the initial interaction with the physician, and they're already excited.
Mm.
They've had a great experience. They've talked to people who are really joyful on the phone. What we always talked about with our patient concierge agents was like, let them hear you smiling through the phone. Like there's just so many things you can do to create that great patient experience. So if the patient shows up engaged and excited and had a seamless experience, maybe they got some patient education, before seeing the physician, you really can support, the physician in that way. And so, no, I don't think the physician has to play a significant role, until it's time for them to work their magic when the patient's in the consult seat.
Mm-hmm. You talked about technology. Do you see, or what do you see the role of AI being in converting and generating
Yeah.
opportunities?
Yeah, my philosophy is really simple and straightforward. I think there's all kinds of ways to use AI for speed to lead, for supporting the internal staff, to surfacing up to the call agents, the patient information and the call policy. And it's like all these little ways that AI can kind of empower the humans to do the human things. I particularly think, though, that the new patient engagement, which is what I primarily focus on, should continue to be human. I think AI, for example, voice AI as one of many examples, has a remarkable opportunity to support existing patients, to get them information quickly, to allow them to do certain tasks very quickly, like rescheduling appointments, things like that. But I think when it comes down to a new patient that's a $5,000 to $20,000, surgical patient, I think the human should continue to educate them, nurture them, relate to them, serve them. And I think in terms of that the AI is anything the AI is used for should be to empower the human to have that human connection.
Okay. What, you talked about, surfacing contextual information and things like that. What are, if I'm in that role where I'm receiving, inbound opportunities, leads, you might say, for procedures, let's put me in that seat, like, coach me up, man, help me figure, what do I need
Yeah.
to know and think about to convert that person and get them excited?
Yeah, well, I would start philosophically with at the practice level, which is, you want to have like, there are three things I always talk about. Number one is speed to lead. You only have a short window of opportunity when a new patient is engaging your practice to get in touch with them.
Mm.
So if a new patient comes into your ecosystem and you wait a day or two, or several
Yeah.
hours to follow up with that patient, you've already lost. You've already lost. So the first thing philosophically for a practice is speed to lead. You want to follow up with them as quick as humanly possible when they're ready to engage you. Second would be joyful persistence. Do not give up on new leads. Our team had mystery shopped almost 1,000 practices, ophthalmology practices over the last couple of years. And one of the more interesting data points that came out of that experiment was that, first of all, most practices, 54% of them, don't follow up with new patients at all. But the ones that do, on average, are only following up 1 day and 17 hours later, so not fast enough, so not the speed to lead you need. And then the second one is only following up about 2 times per new patient lead. So meaning if they can't get a hold of the patient after 2 attempts, they quit, they give up. And so number one is speed to lead. You got to follow up very fast. Number two is be more persistent. Follow up 10 times, not 2 times, to make sure that you're capitalizing on every new patient opportunity. And then third is what I call availability. Like if you're only available to engage new patient leads, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and you're spending dollars on marketing, you're going to be losing a lot of opportunities because the vast majority of your new patient leads are coming in after hours. So they're coming in on evenings, they're coming in on weekends. And so philosophically, for a practice who wants to take this serious, you have to figure out how to empower and support and equip your team to do speed to lead. You need to be following up with them instantaneously with a text message. You need to be making an outbound phone call to them with a real human within 5 minutes. You need to joyfully pursue them. You do not need to give up after 1 or 2 attempts. You need to be following up, a dozen times over 30 days. And then availability, you've got to figure out how can you extend your availability as a team, so that when someone engages a meta ad or someone engages a PPC ad, you can call them within 5 minutes. So we had built out our service where we could follow up with them 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. So when a lead came in, they were getting an outbound call 7 days a week within 5 minutes.
Wow, amazing. If there was one word I want to click on here because it's very unique, and that is joyful. Tell me about joyful follow-up, joyful persistence.
Yeah, I think this is a big deal. And I think it's one of the major reasons. I think if you're able to do this as a practice, to dedicate 1 or 2 people, it depends on your lead volume, of course, but to have a dedicated team of people who are following up with new patients, when you're wearing 5 hats, and this is true for all of us, not just this role within the practice, but when you're wearing 5 hats and you're distracted and you're constantly having to shift your brain from one task to another, it's very hard to, feel energized, to feel focused, to feel happy all the time. And so by allowing your team to really focus on the new patient experience and, new patients exclusively, it gets rid of all this other clutter and likely is going to change the energy of your team. So I think that's the first thing in terms of the joyful part is it's easier to be joyful when you have the time and space as an individual to focus on the thing you've been asked to do versus, asking you to do that across 5 domains. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing is like, what kind of personality and temperament and gifting and skills is the person you're hiring have for this role? It's really hard work. I think the front desk, call agents, whether it's existing patients or new patients, I think it's the hardest role in the practice because it's overwhelming. It's monotonous. It's doing the same thing every day. You're dealing with people all day long. Some are very joyful. Some are not very joyful. Some are patient. Some are not very patient. And so I think focus helps joyful persistence. But then second, and obviously, probably most importantly, it's finding the right person who really is passionate about this work and not just someone who feels stuck in this role. And they're maybe excited about some of the other jobs they have, but they're not excited about being on the phone all day. They're not excited about, 10 to 15 minute phone calls every time you're talking to a new patient because they have questions, they have concerns, they want answers, things like that.
Well, yeah, I love that. That's actually pretty good advice for anyone in a sales type of role, right?
Sure.
So I'm gonna have to incorporate that in my own work there. Well, this is great. This is great advice. Obviously, right now, converting elective procedures, it could be said that it's essential to practice survival. Is that fair to say?
Oh, unequivocally. I mean, I think most practices would agree that, it's tough sledding out there, whether it's reimbursements, whether it's lead volume, whether it's folks having discretionary income to be able to spend on elective procedures. And so, what I've advocated for is like, there's never been a time, more critical than now to capture every single opportunity. If you're spending $2,000 to $3,000 a month, minimum, most of them are spending a lot more than this. If you're spending $2,000 to $3,000 a month trying to drive new patient leads, but you're not equally as obsessed or committed to how you're following up and maximizing every single opportunity in front of you, you're leaving revenue on the table.
Yeah. Well, Cade, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to chat with you. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think would be important to share on this topic?
No, you've asked really good questions, and it's been really fun. I love this stuff, and so thank you for your questions and for letting me to join your podcast. I've really enjoyed this.
100%. And I think anyone in ophthalmology clinic should absolutely get to know you and get to know the expertise that you have to share. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, I love engaging with folks on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and just put in my name, Kade Wilcox, you'll find me no problem. And I try to be very active there. I'm looking forward to launching my own podcast in the next couple of weeks, and so I'll have all kinds of content on my personal page. And I take speed to lead very seriously.
Yes.
And so if you message me, I hope to respond very quickly.
Yes, you live that value. I can vouch for that. Awesome, Cade. Well, thank you so much. Best of luck with everything that you're working on. And thanks for being a guest on the show. And thanks for everybody who's had a chance to listen. I'll put Cade's information in the show notes. And we'll talk to you next time on Eye Care Leadership Live. Well, that brings this episode of Eye Care Leadership Live to a conclusion. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show on your podcast app and share it with someone who would value the content. I promise to bring you more guests and content to help make you a better eye care clinical leader. I also invite you to subscribe to my HR newsletter for eye care leaders. You can find information about that at seasoned-advice.com. Now go out there and lead with confidence.